StoryHinge, Episode 58, Isaac Tolpin, Becoming More.
We sometimes don't know what's inside ourselves until we really challenge ourselves to do something completely out of our comfort zone. And that was that signature experience for me, and what came out of that is...
Welcome to StoryHinge, where we unfold more meaning and value in everyone's personal story. At StoryHinge, we explore foundational ideas and beliefs through diverse personal stories in order to discover more meaningful paths, greater happiness, and accelerated growth in one's life. We believe everyone has a beautiful story to grow. Now here's your host, Jason Vidaurri.
Hey, welcome to StoryHinge. Because first off, I'll just, you may notice my sound's off a little bit here. We had a bit of a family emergency and I'm on the road. My daughter had appendicitis and had to have a appendectomy, so she spent some time in the hospital. All's going well, and give her some time to heal and get better now. So that's changed the course a little bit of the podcast. But I really wanted to get this out to you, and using a cheaper microphone than I usually use, and so I apologize for that. But it's just for this introduction and the outro at the end. The interview itself has a good quality recording, so. But I really wanted to get this out to you guys. Apologize for being a little bit late. But today we have on Isaac Tolpin. And Isaac brings a good background of business and entrepreneurship and some really good perspectives on how to identify your own passions and desires and maybe where you should be. And we talk a little bit about the intersection of family and business, and he has some unique perspectives on that. And really enjoyed that conversation with him. So without further ado, let's start the interview with Isaac Tolpin.
All right, here we are again today on StoryHinge. So excited today, as always. Today we have on Isaac Tolpin. Now, Isaac comes with somewhat a business background, but there's also a diverse story back there as well. So Isaac, why don't you take us back a little bit in time and tell us a little bit about your story, a little bit about your background, and lead us up to some of those pivotal moments or hinge moments that brought you to where you're at today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Jason. And, I grew up in a very small town, Port Townsend, Washington. And in a lot of ways, I'm very thankful for my background, but it did make me very independent at a young age, and that can be good and bad. And one of the things I learned at a young age is the power of entrepreneurship, and just very quickly learned that I'm not such a great employee and more leaning towards the business side. And I made crafts, and we're in a little Victorian town, and so there's lots of craft shows and fairs and things. And I set up the card table, and I sold my wooden boats to kids, and I was 9 years old at the time, and I really learned just the power of contributing and how meaningful that feels when you can take something that you thought of, create it, and then see somebody experience that and better their lives. And so that was really a significant moment for me to really realize, wow, how great would it be to continue to do this at a larger and larger scale as I get older. And so that seed definitely was planted at a young age. But, I think I grew up in an age where, I kind of had a lot of freedom, could do whatever I want, and that's good and bad. It kind of made me self-reliant, and almost to a point that has caused some challenges as I got older. But that's kind of the beginning. Obviously did the college thing, but not really a great college student. Did fine in college, but more an entrepreneur, and just continued in entrepreneurship at a very young age.
Okay. And as you explored a little bit, how did you figure that out about yourself? That hey, the traditional business path doesn't look like it's going to work for me. How do you sort that out as you're going through that?
Well, it's several things. I was just teaching my oldest daughter this the other day because she has a job right now, and she's buying herself a lunch sometimes when she doesn't, pack a lunch, and it kind of costs the same amount as what she gets paid in an hour. And that's a kind of a big wake-up call. I remember that as a young age, buying myself lunch, and I'm like, wait, I spent a whole hour to create enough money just to buy myself lunch. And it just didn't make sense. Obviously, I was a minimum wage. I was a young kid, but and I did have some jobs, but it just never quite made sense to me. And for providing and excelling, and I just had this in me at a young age, a desire to be a business person. I had really no faith when I was younger. So it was all, at that time, more contribution-based and money-based. But, I also, when you try jobs and you just kind of don't fit into the mold, I remember getting a job at a pizza place and manning the cashier, and I thought I was doing a great job, but they let me go on the second day, and I just don't think I fit into that picture.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. All right. Well, anything else? I want to hit maybe a moment or two along that journey before we come up to more present day and a little bit more about the work and story that's going on today.
Yeah, I think, when I was in college, I was doing direct sales with a company called Cutco Cutlery, and they have high-end kitchen knives, but I didn't do it because of the knives or anything. But they had an opportunity to get into leadership and to run what's called a branch office. And it was a signature experience for me because I was very shy, even with some of the early entrepreneurial experience, very shy. Never really worked with customers very much, and certainly never did sales. And so this was kind of a first sales opportunity, and I quickly moved into leadership while I was in college. And in the summer of 1997, I went out to Bellingham, Washington, and ran a branch office. And this was just a signature moment for me because over 200 college students across the country were doing the same thing. And what that looks like is getting a physical office space, hiring a receptionist, setting up recruiting, placing advertising, interviewing people, and building a sales team and managing that sales team to success and so forth. And so what was really inspiring about it is it pulled out of me. I remember having over 100 people on my team, and we would come together for team meetings, and this ability to speak and influence in a very positive way just literally was birthed. It probably was already always in me, but we sometimes don't know what's inside ourselves until we really challenge ourselves to do something completely out of our comfort zone. And that was that signature experience for me. And what came out of that is really a speaking ability and an ability to influence people that I never knew I had. And that was, I really didn't know who I was fully until that started happening. And to cut this story to the end here, we ended up being number one in the entire country out of those 200 college students doing the same thing, and generated over $250,000 in business and profited, close to $30,000. So going back to school, to college with that experience really just perpetuated this belief that, wow, I can do some really big things in business, but at the same time, there's some talents I didn't know I had until I broke out of my comfort zone.
That's really good. I think that's as you're sharing that, a couple different things come to my mind in terms of my experience as well. Either, like you said, pushing myself outside of the box by situation, or I've also had leaders or bosses that saw that in me and pushed me to new places that I never believed I could go. I think that's very fundamental. Any idea on how we can maybe cultivate more of that in our own lives?
Well, we're always faced with choices, and unfortunately, a lot of times we choose the easier path to something. We're in a world where everybody buys things that make life easier, and that can also lead into a psychology of choosing the easier path in our choices. And it really, usually it's the harder path that's a good path, that is the right path to make you stronger. And so remember, we have a certain capacity right now. What I mean by that is the way we think about what we can do, how we can contribute to this world, our beliefs about ourselves, what we're good at and not good at, and how much we think we can handle and take on in our lives. And where, unfortunately, so many people stop and level out at a certain capacity. And I have just learned early on that I never want to level out. I want to constantly push myself so that I can have a bigger contribution, create an interesting life where I'm growing and having more impact. And so that takes choosing that harder path constantly. And that includes why I have 7 kids. That includes why I've tried different businesses and won and lost and done different things, because I'm willing to put myself out there. And I think at the end of the day, what I don't want to live is with regrets. And I don't think anybody listening wants to live with regrets. And that takes, in the moment, choosing the right choices, not based on short term, but based on long term. So I think people that live great lives and have big impact in the way that they're called to are visionaries, and they know how to lead themselves. And I think that's really, really important. And they know how to attach today and the moment and the decisions we're making today to the vision of the future way down the road, and understanding that it takes the right choices. It reminds me of the book Good to Great, Jim Collins wrote, and he has the flywheel concept where people ask him, what made you so successful? What made this company so successful, or this path happen for you? And you can't like look at the flywheel and decide which decision made it great. In fact, if you push a big flywheel, at first it's super hard to push, and you're like doing all your might to get it one round, and then you keep pushing, and a lot of people give up, right, on the hard things, the good things in life. But the people that keep pushing and they make another decision, another right decision, it's the accumulation of pushes. They got that flywheel going to, at some point, its own inertia keeps it going, and all you have to do is barely pat it to keep it going.
Yeah.
But it's all those little pushes. It's not one thing. That's why when we ask advice of people, often we're not getting a really good picture unless you're really good at asking many questions, because it's an accumulation of things that people forgot about that got them to where they are.
Well, that's good. And you pack that full of all kinds of good things. I want to talk a little bit about that. As you're describing that flywheel idea, I love that. I have a chemistry. I'm a chemical engineer, chemistry background, physics background. So I picture a merry-go-round, and you know how if you gently push that, you can start winding that thing up. And if you go to try to stop that in an instant, you feel how much energy you put into that thing and how much momentum you build up. So I love that. I love that vision. I love that concept. I might want to shift a little bit here on you, Isaac, and I think you've shared a lot of value there. I want to shift and shift this to story. Now, as you've progressed, and we've talked about this a little bit before, how has story played into that? I guess your path along the way, and as you see business, as you see, as you classify success, I guess how has story played with that, or has it played in there, and how has it?
Well, it absolutely has. There's the story we're telling ourselves and the story we're telling others. And first of all, if there's a lack of congruency in those, there's a problem, because people can sniff that out where there's a lack of authenticity. But story specifically, I think, what I've learned early on is people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so if you're trying to build something or impact something, then you have to bring that, and it could be your family. So I take this to my family, and I take this into business, which is, you have to speak in terms of story, which is, I think, a vision as a story. You're creating pictures for people to aspire to, because people don't like tactics as much. If you start with the tactics and details, but you don't start with why, you lose. That's why Simon's book starts with why is so powerful. But it's the power of the story of the future that is very important. So I'll find myself, let's take this to the family real quick. I'll find myself sitting with the family and talking about envisioning when they're all married and they have kids, and talking about, what kind of person do you want to be to attract that right spouse? And we have to be the kind of person that, would attract that person.
Yeah.
And and how are your kids going to be? And just kind of giving me a vision also of all of us coming together and planting seeds for that, which I think creates a family legacy and, a lot what you're about. I think in business, or if you're a plumber and you want to provide great service, or no matter what you do, I think creating a movement is so important. Like, I'll give you an example, right? With what my business is right now with my great business partner, Stephen Ryan, we are enabling people to create digital training with their content. So we have trainers and we have companies doing that for internal employee use and so forth. Well, we could just do that, and that could feel good. Like, okay, we're enabling people to train their employees better. That's cool. Okay, we're enabling an influencer to share their content in a way that it calls them not to be there. Oh, that's cool. That impacts them. That's kind of just only a little bit motivating. But instead, if we create a movement through our company to level the playing field of education in the world, that is something inspiring. That is something worth working for every single day. And so I think I've always been extremely motivated because I've created those stories for myself. But then, and I start there, and then I share those stories with other people. That gives people something meaningful to aspire to. So back in my days when I managed Washington, Oregon for Cutco, and we had 32 offices and thousands of people and lots of leaders and all that. It wasn't about, the technical thing that they all did was, sell knives. Okay. But the real thing we were doing is we were changing lives. I mean, we were taking young adults and teaching them skills that would forever make them people that would impact the world and whatever they did next. So I looked at it as a school, a training ground for young adults to launch into the world, to impact the world. So then what happened to all of our leaders? That story became part of our culture, and everybody showed up to work not to sell more knives. Who cares about that? They showed up to work every day to impact the world, but not just with their efforts, but to teach lots of young adults how to be equipped and have the right psychology about things and beliefs about themselves and skills to go out there and do incredible things. And that's much more meaningful. I think at the end of the day, we want to know our life counted for something. But if you're not telling yourself the right stories and telling people the right stories around you, then you don't have a clear enough vision that perhaps is compelling enough to cause you to make those hard choices in the moment that are the right choices.
That's good. That's good. It sounds like that story can embed that whole vision, the values, the culture. If done right, you can embed that within that story that you're telling yourself and you're telling each other as well. I guess maybe looking back on your experience, what stories have influenced you strongly throughout your life?
No, that's great. I think that I really had to come to grips with, first of all, who I was, is that, my younger years, there's nothing really to look to that looks great. I grew up very average and very, maybe in the background of a lot that was going on, and, more shy. And I really, my constitution, my identity in myself, I felt like there was something more. And I guess just believing in my own story that I could be a business owner and have big impact in the world at a very young age, which wasn't planted by anybody actually, except maybe the experiences of selling my crafts and things like that, some of the actions I was encouraged to do. But I think that story, that vision of a better future was really compelling, and it caused me to fight hard to become the kind of person that can attract that and do those things. And so I think that was really important. I think too many people buy into the stories others portray upon you. And so how people perceive you has such a big influence on your own identity. And I have learned at an early age to stick to the story I believe about myself versus the story others believe about me based on current reality. And I think that's incredibly important.
No, that sounds important and powerful to be able to do that. I guess maybe how do you do that? Because as you said, when we're young, we don't have that filter. We don't have the ability to sort that out, and we kind of just get that programming, get that story that we start telling ourselves about ourselves. And then later on, you have the ability to start crafting that. How do you find, I don't know, do you find external stories that seem to help you build it up? External influences, other people? Any idea on how we start, getting that ball rolling?
Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot of great influences in the world. I'm a Christian. I'm a faith-based guy. I came to know the Lord when I was 24, I believe it was 23 or 24. So that was later, the second half of my life so far. But I think that's huge for your identity, is knowing, who you are in God and that. But I think that it's really, really important to, although it's hard to find good other people and heroes, it is really good to still find them. And I've had those people. I've purposely sought out mentors, people older than me, have been down a path and are very godly people that I give permission to speak into my life and hold me accountable. That has been instrumental. I think you have to have good people side by side you that you implicitly trust and feel that they can tell you the truth even when you don't want to hear it. I think that is incredibly important and hard to find. And you're never going to find it if you're not vulnerable first yourself. and willing to get vulnerable with other people and really be in fellowship with them, real community where you're real with each other. You're not just putting on the fake, everything's great, but you're truly, truly honest with each other. And that can be hard to find, but it starts with you being that way, and then you'll tend to attract those people. And so I think that people in your life are very important. If we get off on our own, there's a lot of blind spots you're going to have. In fact, the more successful you get, however you define that, sometimes the more blind spots we get. And I have a story in that, which is I was very, very successful at one time, had the big house, everything, right? Lots of money coming in and so forth. And I got prideful and I had blind spots. And I started to just believe everything would work out no matter what I did. And all I have to do is persist and keep doing what I think are the right things, and eventually it'll work. And you know what? It didn't. I had a company that went out of business, and it was very painful. And I was sitting, with 7 kids. My wife, works from home and is at home. She has her own platform, courageousmom.com, which is great. But I had basically almost zero income to figure out, well, what do I do now? And those are the moments that really define you. It's in the challenge often that you really find out truly who you are. And when you're humbled is sometimes when the greatest next things in your life happen. And so I just clung to my faith and really relied on God in that time, and still do. And he totally took me out of that. But I could have easily just gone and got a job somewhere, right? But you know what? There was people that told me to do that, and it never even once entered my mind to do that, because I know who I am, and I have a strong constitution about myself. Now, hey, if I couldn't feed my family, and that was the only way, trust me, I would do whatever it takes and get a job. But I have a strong constitution about myself. What I mean by that is I know who I am. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm passionate about. And I know what my skills are. And it's important to do that, because in this world, there's lots of opportunity. And it's important to know what to say yes and no to. And too many people say yes to things that are really good or appear to be really good, and may even make them money or be good for their family at first glance or things like that, but are actually not the best thing for you. And they might be even hampering with the very best things for you. And so you really have to audit yourself. You have to audit your life and go, hey, what are the good things that are preventing me from the better things? This is not a grass is greener mentality. This is more of, there's only so many things we can do. And are we doing the easier path and that are good things? Or are we doing the harder path that builds our capacity, to their capacity training, that make us capable for more impact, but at the same time keeping our priorities straight? So it's a good thing to ask.
That is. As I'm hearing your story and hearing you talk about this, it sounds like you have a pretty good sense of yourself through all this. That's one of the foundations you seem to have, and kind of your story within yourself as well. And I guess how do you get to that point to have that? Because that's one of the, I guess, maybe periodically throughout my life, and maybe it's common to many of us, is that we come to that point of, who am I anyway? Who's this Jason? What am I about? What do I like? What do I want to be about? Do you have any insights on that for yourself?
Sure. So just ask yourself a simple question. What's your purpose in life? Oh, it's not so simple, is it?
No.
Okay. So, but it's still worth asking. And then you start analyzing. A good exercise you can go through. Here's a practical thing you can do. Okay. And I've helped people do this that I've coached, but is you make a big list. So take out a blank piece of paper, make a big list of all your skills, write all your skills. I'm a good encourager. I know how to type. Just write this big list of skills, okay? As many as you can. Then write a big list of what you're passionate about. High interest level stuff. Like, I really love reading or whatever. You make that big list. And then you make the hardest list to make. The list of your callings. Okay? These are things that you may not be passionate about right now, but you always feel tugged towards. Like, I always feel tugged towards, ministry, or I always feel tugged towards helping kids read, or I always feel tugged towards, business, whatever it is. And then what you do is you take those 3 lists, and one by one, you eliminate them. So, okay, if I have to eliminate one on my skills list of least important out of all of them, what is it? And then you go to the next one, which is the next least important, next least important, next least important. And then you get your top 10. And you do that on your other 2 lists. Now you have 3 top 10s. Now look where those top 10s intersect. It's a really good way of identifying parts of who you are and parts of what you should be doing with who you are.
Yeah, so I've done similar ones before with skills and passions, and then looking for intersections. I haven't done the calling one part, so that's interesting. And I like your elimination down to the top 10. That also filters it down even better. So I'm gonna have to try that. That's good.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And then I think another thing to answer your question is, hey, who created you? I mean, look at what God has to say about you, and I think that there's a lot of really positive things. Like, He didn't create us to be average and to not contribute to the world. He created us to have impact and be in community with other people. And I think, how does that play into your life?
All right, very good. Well, Isaac, maybe we're going to shift here again and have some other. I have a couple different things I want to hit on because as I mentioned before, you're my first guest that has more children than I do. So that's pretty cool. And I want to hit some family stuff here, but I think first I want to hit some of my target audience are people in their mid-30s and kind of looking around life saying, well, things are okay. And it work's okay. Family's okay, but I feel something missing. And I think I like the term you use for that. It's called spiritual agitation. Yeah. Why don't you talk to that and say, what is that telling us, and what could we do with that?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, not to be disrespectful, but to people listening, but I think a lot of people are the walking dead. And what that means is we bought into culture. We've bought into what culture defines as success. And I think that leaves us really empty. I think how culture defines success leaves us feeling empty inside in a lot of ways. And that is, great job, great career. Not that those things are bad, don't get me wrong. Maybe it's, our kids are playing sports, they're in school, they're always going to college. Maybe it's, a cultural definition of, how our marriage should look and things like that. And I think there's a biblical definition that's much stronger. And I think that we're a lot of times, and I've said some of this already on this call, but a lot of times we're being pressured and we don't even realize it towards directions in our career. We're being pressured to, I just need to provide for my family, which is honorable. Don't get me wrong. But if we really look at all that, what are we being driven by? And I think if we're being driven by what we're called to do in our lives, how God made us, in the skills and passions and interests, and keeping the priorities set that, God implanted in us and put in His Word, I think that we're far more successful. And we're going to kind of wake up and go, hey, I've kind of bought into a little bit off path here. And if you're a little bit off path with your life, over an accumulation of years, you become very, very much off path. Mm-hmm. And so you sometimes it's good to stop and do an audit and get a journal out and just really evaluate, every part of your life: financial, spiritual, family, career, and really look at all of those things, rate them, but then think deeper than that and just think about them. Is this how this should be? Not just how I want it to be. Our feelings can be fleeting. We need to be governed more about, I think, our Creator, what God wants for our lives, and what's a biblical approach to things. And so, is family truly, let's just take one in for a second. You might be feeling empty because you're neglecting your family. Well, wait, I have to neglect my family because I have to travel for work all the time. Well, where did the have to come from? Okay, you have to? Okay, no, you chose to. And I think we have to get rid of, I have to, this pressure, this, that, and go, no, I chose to orientate my life. I chose to say yes to things that took me away from my family. And maybe that's making you feel empty. Or I chose to say yes to things that prevent me from doing what I'm really called to. I think even marriage, right? I chose to do things that are hurting my marriage.
Yeah. I chose to ignore this or ignore that when I knew I shouldn't have.
Exactly. And it's get back to what's most important. Okay, your marriage. Okay, your kids. Is it really by your actions? Would someone looking in be able to tell that is the most important thing to you? And if you were honest with yourself, a lot of times in a lot of marriages, in a lot of families, people would say that is actually not what your top priority is. Your top priority is your ego and looking good and getting a promotion. Your top priority is making more money, not just so you can provide, so that you can have a nicer car and look better to your friends. So that's being driven by culture versus driven by real priorities that innately, subconsciously make you feel alive when you're fulfilling the most important things right.
Yeah. Now, I saw something related to this in on one of your blogs about ceremony. And this is piqued my interest because I actually had a guest on before talking about, basically talking about men and how, in our society right now, we've lost a lot of our ritual and cultural steps and those rites of passage, if you will, as we grow up. And, when do you become a man? That you can ask that question. It's like, well, I don't know. When you get a car, when you go to college, what is it? We don't have any ceremony, if you will. And I saw that you had talked about that. You want to elaborate on that a little bit and tell us about ceremony and the importance of it, and maybe what the story about your son?
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, generations repeat themselves unless you deliberately do the things differently. So think about your family and how you're raised, and everybody's called to do even better, I think, than previous generations. And so let's do that. And I really felt that calling because, I looked back and when did I become a man? I don't know. Okay. So it's definitely, when I was in college, I made 30 grand in a summer. So does that make me a man because I made good money for what I did? No, it doesn't. Okay. And so creating a accurate definition of manhood or womanhood is so important. And when somebody's young, like my son, it was at the age 14, it was this year we did it. We did a ceremony just giving a clear definition of manhood, and then having people who I know are going to be in his life long term, that I know will be praying for him and encouraging him around a boardroom style table, speaking life into him and expecting more out of him from now on. Was just a powerful transformation of being a young man and moving into manhood. And they used to do this in the nights, the time of nights, and people would move up. They had this ring, you become a squire and all these things, right? And you get mentored by a knight to become a knight. And we need people around us. It's my job to raise my kids, but I need to have good fellowship and good men around me and good women around me to help me raise my sons and daughters. And if you don't have that, you need to look for that fellowship. You need to really audit your relationships and go, you know what, let's really be diligent about raising our kids, because we need that actus. There's a loss of ceremony today. In fact, people don't even take the marriage ceremony seriously enough, and the divorce is crazy. So we need to go back to some ceremonies and acknowledge things in each other that are rites of passage and are kind of anchors in our life to hold us accountable or remember who we are.
Yeah, I like that. And as I thought about that, as I read your story, and I'm like, you know what? And maybe I'm a story guy, so maybe I'm kind of like that. What is that? If your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
I might be some of that, but I thought, okay, what is ceremony though? You're essentially creating a story for your son around that. I mean, he'll always have that to look back and say, oh yes, there was this evening, definitely a story there, and he got that sitting down with these other men. I mean, you so well create it for him that memory will be with him forever. That story, if you will be with him forever. He'll know, yep, I took a step that night. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely, yeah. And he had to speak back to everybody, his commitment and share, and each person gave a gift that resembled the message they gave. So they all 5-minute message, and they gave him a gift, and so it's just incredibly powerful. And don't feel bad if you haven't done that or you haven't experienced that. It's never too late. That is the first ceremony I've ever ran for one of my kids, and I have 7, and it just happened this year. And so it's never too late to act on these things. But if you want to know more about that specific thing, there's a great book called Raising Modern Day Knights. And that is where I got the idea.
Okay. That's cool. I want to jump into that a little bit and talk a little bit about family. I know, seeing some of your work and the way you talk about that, that's, I guess I would say, more integrated than a lot of people would have. We kind of isolate things sometimes or put them in boxes. Oh, my business is over here and my family's over here, and there's kind of a wall between, and I think of them differently. But you seem to have a different take on that. You want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually built a course on this, which is build more than your business, but it has to do with non-business people too, which is so many times, think about your skills and your ability maybe to work with people or run a meeting or, lead a team or, work with employees and people at your work. And to think about all those skills to participate in a meeting and in those kinds of things. Let me ask you now, does that influence and leadership come back into your home? And a lot of times, unfortunately, it doesn't. We compartmentalize our life and we give our best to our work and we give the least to our family. Oh, but I'm tired. Oh, I'm sorry. You can say you're tired in heaven, but while you're on this earth and you have kids, you give them your best. Okay. That's it. It's like, no question. I mean, there's so many nights I'm talking to kids late into the night sometimes because I have teenagers now. And then I still will work after that sometimes because I've got something to get done. Well, I stay up till 2 a.m. that time, and I still get up in the morning and nail it. I mean, it's like there's no time to spare if you're a father or mother, and you got to bring that same influence. Like, one thing I think is good is that I don't watch sports. I don't have cable TV. We do have Netflix and Apple TV, and we watch movies. We're very carefully curate what we watch and make sure it's good stuff that's going to better our lives. But for the most part, but it's really important not to be distracted. Now, what's the big distraction? Our phones. So, devices and things like that. So you bring that to the table. Like, the dinner table should be the boardroom table. A dinner table should be rich. But you know what? If your kids play sports, I bet you never even have dinner together. Okay, so now we're talking about a good thing. Are sports good? Yes. Is it good to not eat dinner as a family? Did that create a cultural shift in our family that even when they're not playing sports, we barely eat together anymore? Did we allow that cultural shift to happen in our family? Remember, there's constant mediocrity pushing against us with leading our families. And we have to push the other way every single day. And so is it important that every kid plays sports to the detriment of the culture of our family? No. Let me tell you a vineyard story real quick, since you like stories. I like stories too, by the way. We had a vineyard one time, and it was a family vineyard. It was 1,285 plants, Pinot Noir and Riesling. And it was a new thing. I never grew up understanding this. I hired a consultant to teach me how to do it. And it was beautiful. And we did it just right. And it was dialed in. It was just so beautiful. And it takes 3 to 4 years to get fruit. So imagine all the patience and money and time and effort for 3 years, tons of effort, to get your first fruit, right? And that's, for like a dad, that's kind of like your child, like when they're a baby, you can't play with them as much, but when they're 4, you can start playing with them, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, but the fruit's there. Now, my consultant said, and I saw all the fruit on the limb. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's happening. We're going to create this amazing wine. And I'm not even a big wine guy. It was I just always thought vineyards are beautiful, and I wanted to do it. Great project. Okay. So we're building this, and the fruit's there. And now the consultant tells me, okay, here's what you have to do. You have to cut half of the fruit off and let it drop to the ground. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I plotted, toiled, worked hard, spent all this money so that half of my fruit I cut off before it's even ripe. And he's like, yeah, you have to. I mean, you don't have to. You can make an easy choice here, and you can have more fruit, but the fruit won't be good enough to make great wine. And I'm like, why won't it be good enough? He's like, well, because a plant only gets so much energy. And if you want to disperse that energy amongst all of the fruit, it will be too dispersed. But if you cut half of the fruit off, all of the energy will go into half of the fruit, which will make fruit worthy of great wine. So if you want great wine, if you want to actually have the best product, then you need to get rid of half of the fruit. And why can't I use it or something like that? Because when you drop it to the ground, it adds nutrients that helps the plants. And I'm like, oh, so I can't even keep it and do something with it. I can't even let it get ripe. No, because we need all during the ripening, we need half of it to go, all the energy to go to half the fruit. And just ask yourself in your lives, what have you said yes to that has dispersed your energy and your family's energy to where everything's average?
Yeah, that's good. Something to think about.
Whereas what do you need to say no to so all of your energy goes into things that actually produce great fruit? And when it comes to children, the Bible says relates to children as fruit and fruitfulness. And so are you saying yes to things that the culture says are amazing that actually are going to produce average or even bad fruit?
Yeah, that's good, Isaac. Got something to think about there. No, that's good. I'm glad we shifted a few times. I'm going to shift again here. I want to give you a chance to talk about your work today. I know you're doing some other things. You talked about running businesses before and seeing some failure, and my understanding is you're have another thing going on. I want to give you a chance to talk about that, and also where people could connect with you that would like to.
Yeah, so I told a little bit about that. I built, I was very successful, built a startup, it failed, had to deal with that and stay the course. And I'm just blessed to have an incredible business partner with Steve and Ryan, who is more on the tech side and a lot of business savvy too. And we built something called conveyyour.com. So CONVEYOUR.com is like convey your message. And it is an answer to killing boring in digital training. So think about digital training, for example, and what you think about that if you're listening. And usually it's boring, okay? In fact, higher education, Ivy League schools, they're getting 25% completion of online classes, even though their parents are paying full price for them, even if they're on campus. Large MOOCs, big platforms, they're getting horrible retention. Corporate America is feeding people digital training that's so boring, it's actually killing their employee engagement and killing the cultures they're trying to create.
Yeah, I think I just went through one of those today at work. I was like, okay, I got to do this training. Yeah, I can't even remember what it was on. That's how that's how good that training was.
Okay, so there's stupidity happening here, because here's what happens. The company has to do it for compliance reasons so they don't get sued, because they can prove their employees learned something. The problem is their employees aren't actually learning something. But the company's insulated because, well, I can prove that we did teach them. We did give it to them. Okay, well, why waste time, effort, and energy just to satisfy something when the actuality of that thing isn't happening, of the employees learning something? Okay, and why put them in front of something if you don't have to? That is the antithesis of the very cultures you're trying to create. And so we have completely disrupted this, where we've created a platform where it's very, very easy to put content together that's highly interactive and engaging and matches human behavior, where the learners actually enjoy it and fulfills the compliance stuff as well. We also made it to where any individual can do it themselves and create compelling training that is far more compelling and interesting than what people are paying $500,000 to create. And they could do it themselves for almost very little cost. So we're talking about a complete disruption in space. So we have influencers, trainers, speakers using it. We have organizations using it. We have Fortune 500 companies using it for internal training. And it's really an answer to, let's transform this and create something that's easy to produce and really fun to learn from.
That sounds good. Can you put stories in there to disseminate culture within an organization? Is that how?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, it's the software platform. So you can you create the stories in the videos you create of yourself talking about story, or you can make the videos however you want. And then what we built is what houses those videos. And if you just have videos talking at people, even with great story, you're not going to retain people. What's really important is to gamify them and create engagement. People don't want to just talk out; they want to engage and experience content. And if you create that and you create it and you tap into their human achievement drive with, achievement currency and leaderboard, and if you drip it to them, you send content directly to them with notifications, not email, now you've completely changed the game as far as engagement. So yes, the answer is you use videos, but then those videos are brought to life with the software. So now there's less pressure on, creating these really expensive videos that are highly edited. You have to be good, but now you can create just really good videos, and then the software brings them to life.
Sounds good. And where was that connection with you again?
Conveyor.com, conveyour.com. And on the front of the site, there's a little demo. You can put your name and your cell phone number in. It'll text you a link, and you can play with it right on your phone. As simple as that. Another place to find me is isaac.tolpin.com. So IsaacTolpin.com. And also, if you want to see really what's going on in our family with 7 kids and things like that, you can find my wife and what's going on the family side of things at courageousmom.com.
Okay. I'll be sure to put those links on the podcast and on the website, so people will have that. All right, Isaac, this has been great. I really enjoyed all this, and I want to give you, I guess, one more chance here to share anything that we may have missed that you'd want to make sure gets out there.
Yeah, I would say just don't waste your life with the wrong definition of success, adhering to the pressures of life versus what you're actually called to. And it's really important to audit yourself and look at, why are you doing these things you're doing, and are you sacrificing the very most important things that should be your top priorities? And it's time to rise up, parents, to actually bring your skills to your kids, listen to your kids, train your kids, disciple your kids, and prepare them to launch them in this world. And one of the revelations I've had is no matter how successful I am in business or my career, it pales in comparison to the impact I can have through my children. If you raise your children correctly and you send them out to the world, that legacy will live beyond you. Your businesses come and go every day. But your children and their children can create a massive legacy of impact.
That's good. Well, Isaac, thank you for spending time with us here on StoryHinge. I think you've given us a ton to step up to take it to the next level, if you will. So thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure.
All right. Thank you to Isaac, and thank you all for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. Just wishing you guys a great week coming up, and hoping you're looking at your own story, finding places you can improve it, taking steps forward, and we'll keep working to bring you more great content. You guys have a great one.
Thank you for sharing with us at StoryHinge. We hope this time together has added more goodness to your journey. Until next time, onward and upward, and may your own story continue to grow more beautiful.